Good afternoon. Welcome back from the break. The only thing between us and wine is this session. So the earlier we get started, the better it will be for all of us. So if you are here for the session called Developing a Big Data Game Plan, you are in the right room. And with me, my name is Piyush Malik. I'm the moderator here. I'll introduce myself last. I'll go to my left. We have Pulya from Pivotal. She can introduce herself. And we have Catherine from ODCA, also works for Intel. And we have Sri Dandekar, but a better version of Sri, Brian Addison. So let each of the speakers go and introduce themselves for 5 minutes each. And we'll come back, we'll have some questions, and then, of course, till that time, think about your questions, line up here, and then we'll alternate between our questions, my questions, and the audience poll. Are we ready?
Yes.
All right. Pulya.
Crowd goes wild. Hello, my name is Hülya Emir Farinas. I'm the lead for healthcare and life sciences at Pivotal. I manage a small team of data scientists with backgrounds in biomedical informatics, biomedical engineering, biophysics, computer science, machine learning in general. And my background actually is in operations research. So I'm very interested in the intersection of machine learning and optimization, making decisions, business decisions when there are uncertainties, and help providers, payers, pharmaceutical companies make most of their data. Happy to be here.
Kathy?
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Spence, and I'm here representing the Open Data Center Alliance. Has anyone here actually heard of the Open Data Center Alliance? No. Okay, so there's one or two guesses here. The Open Data Center Alliance is a consortium of over 300 companies that have come together to define requirements for cloud computing. And I was asked to come here today to talk about some of our usage models where we have the intersection between big data, mobile, and cloud computing. So I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But they're making up the Open Data Center Alliance. We have a bunch of companies. Intel is an advisor to the Open Data Center Alliance. But other companies that contribute to that consortium are the Walt Disney Company, BMW, SAP, Infosys, the National Australia Bank. Well, there's over 300 companies that contribute to that. And it's all about creating requirements for how we want to consume cloud computing. So it's from the consumer point of view. Okay, and a little bit more about me. So my other job that I have, I work for Intel in the IT department, and I'm part of the cloud computing program there. I'm a principal engineer. I'm the tech lead for our platform as a service, and just how we run our own enterprise private cloud for Intel as a company, right? So how we run our business, and it also includes how we consume public cloud technologies for, again, how we run our business.
Kathy? Brian?
Well, good afternoon. My name is Brian Anderson. I'm with Dell Software. Shri sends his regrets as I travel. Shri is better looking and more eloquent than I, so I will do my best to make up the difference. So I'm with Dell Software. A little bit about Dell Software and a little bit about me. So Dell Software is a $1.5 billion run rate business. It has 3 business units. Threat protection, firewall protection solution, or solution set, systems admin, and then I'm in information management, which essentially I call big data BI stack source. We offer Toad, which is the largest database admin tool set in the marketplace, about 2 million global community members. We have Dell Boomi, which is the cloud integration platform recognized by Gartner as the leader in the space. I happen to have been the business champion behind the acquisition 2 years ago. It's been years. And then last week, we acquired StackScout, which is the A leader in predictive analytics, much to IBM's SPSS and the SAS Institute. So we're thrilled to be part of that community of analytics. My role on Biomed is to create and architect the go-to-market partner model for predictive analytics. We'll talk about that today and talk about game management.
All right, I'll go last to introduce myself. Piyush Malik, as I said earlier, from IBM. At IBM, I am part of the Big Data Worldwide Center of Excellence. In fact, I lead that group that I formed 3 years back. And actually, I'm a 25-year veteran in management consulting field, and actually a data geek. I've been dealing with data all my life. And I'm glad to be in the company of so many people here who are bringing diverse perspective. A little bit background about IBM, a little bit 102-year-old company which has been transforming itself of late, doing more in terms of software and services than hardware. IBM Watson is right in this museum downstairs, so go and check. And as we are moving into the era of cognitive computing, and big data, mobility, and cloud, and software as a service being the 4 disruptive forces that we are aligning to. So we'll be talking more about it. As part of my job and why I'm here is that I've set up teams of data scientists and big data engineers to service clients. And yes, IBM has software and hardware in the big data space, but I represent the services part of it, which means I work with any software, and my team works with the toughest problems that the clients have. So hopefully, with the diverse background that we have, we'll set up for a very interesting conversation. And as a starter, I basically want to ask each of the panelists to share what are the top use cases in the big data space that you yourself are seeing, or for your clients, or what you want to talk about? So, in turn.
So before I talk about use cases, I realized maybe Pivotal needs an introduction too, if IBM needs one. So Pivotal is primarily a technology company. We have distributed computing platform for unstructured data and structured data, and we developed some analytical capabilities on top. So we have an open source library of machine learning algorithms called MATLib. So you'll be able to run logistic regression, for instance, with billions of rows and hundreds of features within minutes. So everything that we design says that computation needs to come closer to data, as opposed to just getting a little sample from your data warehouse or whatever big data solution you have, and then analyzing it there, and then try to bring the insight back into the big data analytics platform. So we're just working really hard to read through that, whatever you need to do to data, running clustering, regression, classification, optimization, forecasting, etc. Everything will happen closer to data without really having to move it. And then we don't think that's where the story ends, so we have rapid application development capabilities on top, building data products, analytics-driven, data-driven products. So Pivotal Labs, Extreme Labs, those are the business units that are in charge of building these capabilities. And we also have a platform as a service kind of offering with CloudFront. Collaborating with organizations. So the use cases. So, big data analytics has a huge play in a lot of different verticals. Where we see the demand is usually in places like marketing, where people are trying to understand the customer. And sometimes it's not possible with the proprietary data that the customer has. So they're looking outside, they're trying to get external data and have a good understanding of what the customer needs. That's one area. Then utilities is a huge vertical for us as well, because of Internet of Things. There's sensor-generated data, all kinds of intelligent decisions to be made, understanding with where any fraudulent activities, for instance, with smart meters, that's a huge use case. But since I'm the lead for healthcare and life sciences, I would like to spend a few minutes on discussing some healthcare use cases. So for providers, There are a lot of opportunities, of course. Some of the decisions are clinical decision support systems, just doing research, understanding diseases better, making the right diagnosis, coming up with the right treatment for the cohort the patient belongs in. So that's a huge difference. It's not one size fits all. It's for your needs, for the group that you're in, what is the best therapy for you. And also a lot of resource allocation decisions, of course. And some of the decisions in hospitals are made outside of the physician's room, actually. And one use case that is coming up a lot in provider space is making use of the monitor feeds. A lot of the vital signs, histories, everything that is captured in hospitalization, for instance. So can we make predictions? One use case that we just recently finished was like predicting unplanned transfers into ICU units by just looking at the vital signs. People do care about this because mortality rates are completely different for people who have unplanned transfers into ICU. So if they can predict it, if they can predict for this particular patient whether they're going to have an unplanned transfer in the next 12 hours, things do change for that particular patient. So making use of all that data, not only demographics, not only prior diagnosis, procedures, medications that this particular patient had, but the data that is being captured during the hospitalizations, that has value. And a lot of providers have been just making real-time decisions and discarding that data. It's just with the new technology we found, our new ability to deal with larger amounts of data says that we can make better decisions. And we have other use cases in the pharmaceutical space and payers as well. Can talk about those.
So in fact, if I was to summarize, big data saves lives. That's the use case primarily here is Kathy.
Okay, so I'm here representing the Open Data Center Alliance. So all of our use cases are enterprise use cases, and they're from the consumer point of view of whether I am consuming private cloud data associated with the private cloud, or whether I'm consuming public cloud type services, whether it be SaaS or something else out there, right? One of the usage models that we developed is something called the Information as a Service usage model. So I think that a lot of people, when they think about the intersection of cloud and big data, they think about the hosting, right? So you think about taking a big data application and hosting it on the cloud because of the great affinity there, the fact that you get massive scalability, and it's a good way to do the computing associated with big data. But really the information as a service usage model doesn't talk about that at all. It really talks about more from an enterprise point of view, what type of an application and architecture that you need to address not only big data but all of your enterprise needs. So the information as a service usage model is actually recommending three things. First of all, to create an information architectural framework, basically take an in-state vision of all of your data needs, including big data, and then also have an enterprise data model that's contextualized for your particular business, so that you really understand what data elements are very important for you, right? And then the third thing is to take a catalog approach for your data. So when you think about your data and you think about what's going on in terms of cloud and applications, it's really taking that cloud model and applying it to data, right? It's not all one monolithic thing. It's not data in a silo, but it's actually small components that are designed to scale out and bringing things together as you need them dynamically to address what your needs are. And so the information as a service usage model actually has some pretty interesting insights in it. We have a sample information architectural framework that you could use if it makes sense for your particular business. We also have a recommended approach for how you can phase in a service over time. We also had some technology suggestions in different areas and thinking about your data holistically, your big data applications plus your master data plus other forms of data, whether they be on-premise or off-premise. And also we have RFP requirements that are defined in that usage model. So if you are thinking about creating your game plan, you can use those requirements that have been thought about by a lot of companies who are doing this already, and you can incorporate those requirements into your RFPs or into your game plan. And if you are a provider of technology, you can use these requirements as input into your product roadmaps.
So, to summarize what Kathy talked about, the use case of big data on the cloud. So I was thinking about Kathy, big data, putting big data on the cloud. Right?
The one use case that Dell specifically is around marketing. So it goes back to yesterday's discussion around the 360-degree of customer acquisition, customer retention. That cuts across. Dell was an early adopter of social media sentiment analysis for listening. We built kind of an internal system, kind of on its own. We listened to its customers as early as 2008, pretty early on through the revolution of social media. So that's an area that we're focusing on internally, but also externally with our solutions and mapping them on our solutions.
So typically, when we talk about think about Dell, we don't really think about Dell being a big data company, but I'm sure there's a place for Dell in the big data landscape. And if you have ever seen, if you've ever Googled big data landscape, you'll see a pretty picture with all the company logos there, and there's infrastructure layer, there's the implementation layer, and all that good stuff. So I want to start with you and come back and say, which all layers of the landscape does your company have services or offerings or products?
Well, actually, probably all of them. Clearly, from the infrastructure standpoint on the server hardware side. From the software perspective, I mentioned our new acquisition of SASOC last week, as well as application integration. And then my colleague yesterday here, Andrew Lippis, yesterday talked about healthcare services focused on that industry. So all kind of all three across the spectrum. That's focused. But it should be kind of commercial business to be focused. Analytics needs to be specific to the main institution. So
Why don't you get that in my
oh, sorry.
Right. Okay.
Well, I'm not here really representing Intel, from a solution provider standpoint. Intel's an ingredient provider, and we have a number of hardware components and software components that you can use to build solutions. So I don't know that it's a great question for me.
So let me just say that Intel has been in the news lately for investments in the big data landscape, and with its huge stake in another provider. But they had their own distribution of Hadoop as well. And typically whenever we talk about big data, Hadoop always comes in the discussion. But last year I heard with the distribution that Intel was introducing, and I was there at Strata when this happened. I heard them talk about how from the software layer they're going to take big data into the chip. So I was hoping to get that answer, but I guess I'm not getting that answer from you.
No, you're out of luck on that one. But big data is really important. From the standpoint of that, it's really a disruptive, computing, trend that. So it has far-reaching implications for Intel. So obviously Intel would be working on that.
Pivotal will be actually is represented in all layers, I would say. For the services part, our attitude is a little different than other vendors. Some of them don't have any, and they're like, "This is your Hadoop distribution. Go ahead and do something interesting with it." And that usually doesn't work out that well. But we also don't have we have a very skilled, close to 40 data scientists in our data science practice and have advanced data engineers as well. But we do consider ourselves technology enablers, so we just teach them how to do it by running a few use cases, and we never have the intention to become a huge consulting service on top of big data analytics, mostly as software offerings. And so the technology adoption is hard. It's not an easy thing. Sometimes it takes a few use cases to convince an organization that this new way of doing things is much better, and you'll be able to build better quality predictive models, and things will run faster. You'll be able to incorporate a lot more data in your modeling. So sometimes we have to work with the same customer multiple times, but our primary job is to show what the platform can do for our customers and allow our customers to innovate with our technology.
So just to complete the round, and especially with IBM software, actually, we talk about IBM as an end-to-end solution in terms of big data and enterprise grade, putting security on top of the open source tools. And so our platform is now called Watson Foundation, and various other acquisitions that we've done on top of organic research from our IBM research. By the way, Nuria used to be an IBM researcher many years back. Before getting on to Pivotal, but so we've got that platform along with big data at rest, which is Hadoop, with big data in place, which is the appliance we have, and so these acquisition and big data in motion through the InfoSphere Streams, which is the streaming analytics engine that we have again in our platform that software group from IBM offers. Along with that, information integration and governance and industry applications on top of it. So in fact, we package it all together as one of the most comprehensive offerings out there. But when I go and talk to my clients, I would talk about how we apply it to practical situations. And essentially, my goal in my decades of consulting career has been how to make my clients more data driven and get value out of data. So the next question I want to ask is maybe from Brian onwards. What's your perspective on making, what is a data-driven organization, and what does one need to do to become one? And maybe you can answer that, or if you're not comfortable, just say, is data more important or getting insights from it are more important?
Wow. I'd like to shake a finger, actually, at line of business. I'm a line of business guy, so I'm on the management side. And I've seen this time and time again in discovery, kind of engagements with customers around their big data initiatives. And what I see consistently is the line of business manager, that includes me, okay, they don't have their act together. And it goes back to a point that Bill from EMC made yesterday. Just 3 things to know. What decisions you want to make, what questions you're going to ask, and what are the KPIs. Management needs to do a much better job around that, because without that, the team members here, the data scientists, the technology really can't map to it effectively. So that's my counsel, my observation, and recommendation.
Okay, so I have a little bit of a different perspective, right, coming from the cloud side of things. This is a big point that's made in the information as a service usage model, is that, you should look at data as a supply chain. So to really kind of think of it that way, and also, it's not siloed anymore, right? So I think that the world is really, we've all observed that the world is speeding up, and we're becoming more and more dynamic. Things are becoming more and more real time, and we're trying to get to the point where we can do things that are more predictive, and I think going beyond that, more from like an anomaly detection standpoint versus just static siloed data. So I think it is important to understand what data is important to you. And so I would say that that's true from, understanding what are the key things that are going to impact your business, and that those things you are going to want to streamline and so forth. But you also have to think about it from a flexibility standpoint as well, because you're going to have to add more and more types of data sources into the mix, and you have to be positioned for that flexibility.
So the question is, what do you need to transform your business into a data-driven company? And of course, you need technology, and you need to be able to extract features from unstructured data sources, for instance. For that, you may need a new type of technology. You also need skills, so you need to hire a bunch of data scientists who will be able to make sense out of data. And I would say you also need a new attitude. Sometimes companies who tend to use data in their business are not data-driven. Pharmaceutical companies, for instance, are very much hypothesis-driven. Sometimes they have a hunch, they say, well, let's design an experiment, and then let's collect data and see if it is true or not, which is fine, but it is very expensive. So we think that the new attitude should be, let's take a look at all the data that we have, then let's see if we can discover a few hypotheses first. So data-driven approaches will allow you to see if there are any new, if you can capture some causalities, correlations, and then you'll start your experiment. You'll start designing your experiment to see if it is actually true. So it is a hard change. It's a different culture. It's a different attitude towards data, and there is a lot of mistrust in data. Some people think that they can't use their data because it's not clean enough. There's no such thing. If you actually have the right skill, the people with the right talent, they'll be able to make sense out of messy data. They'll be able to identify biases in it, and then put anomalies in it, correct for them. If they're missing data, they'll be able to use clever imputation methods, and then they'll be able to get to the insight that you're looking for. And we've done that many times, so, and I don't think there is, no data is too messy to be used.
They say that data is the new natural resource, and to that I add, just like we've had wars over oil, the next World War III is gonna happen over data. So with that, we are at the halfway mark, and I want to invite anybody in the audience to ask questions to line up here and or raise their hands, and over here, the mic is here. So if there are questions, please come forward. And meanwhile, I will continue with our conversation. And while you come here, especially Julia, one question to you.
Actually, while we're waiting for the brave soul to come and ask us a question, I wanted to add one more thing for the transforming your business into a data-driven organization. Like, getting the most insightful model is not enough if it's not if you're not giving it to the people who are actually making decisions. That operationalization of the models is extremely important. I've seen it too many times. People, they have the right technology, they have the right skills, and they work hard and build this very insightful model, and then the data scientist is on the shoulder, a great job, this was very creative, and it never goes, it's not fed into a data-driven, analytics-driven data product. So if you don't have that path to operationalization, you're missing out. That's not the goal.
Julia used some very important words which I want to play on, and she's a senior data scientist, and data scientist is a term that HBR had our business review last year in an article by Davenport and Patil said the sexiest profession of the 21st century. That was last year.
That's a lot of pressure on you.
And I want to ask her if she still thinks in 2014 that's the case. Well, her perspective, and then I want to get other panelists' view as well on that. So, starting with you, please.
So I don't know about sexy, but it is a very exciting job to be a data scientist. If you are interested in solving puzzles and then solving mysteries, that's the kind of thing we do every day. And especially if you're working in the healthcare arena, what you do is going to have some sort of an impact on someone's life. So it's an excellent job to have.
Brian, do you agree?
Certainly do. There's also another, I think, hatred to this equation. That's the data analyst, right? That sit side by side. So like, component to this that I encourage talks to look at in terms of career investment.
So do you think that the people who used to have business analyst as a job title earlier or data analyst, they've all upgraded in their resumes and say data scientists, and they are data scientists?
Well, there's a blurring of the distinction, I think, that's happening.
Okay. You want to elaborate, Kathy?
I can't elaborate on what he said, but I think we need our super smart data scientists, absolutely, but kind of applying the cloud lens to that of operationalizing the information that is gleaned from this. One of the reasons that cloud is really taken off is because of that self-service aspect to it, and really trying to create an environment where it makes it easy for people to do what they need to do. I like to call it make it easy for people to do the right thing by providing the right tools and the right constructs for them to do their job. So I think taking that approach of that everyone needs to be able to get to their information self-service and on demand, and being able to get at that very quickly when they need it. That's a really key part of it.
So there's still no questions from the audience, it seems like, so I'll continue to play with the data scientist team. And by the way, does anyone see any horns on, does she look like a unicorn? You know what I'm talking about?
We do exist, yeah.
So they are the most beautiful creature, they're like unicorns and very rare. And that's what I heard in a talk last 2 years back, that the golden pot at the end of the rainbow and unicorn coming across together. That's what a data scientist. So I feel blessed that we have a data scientist here. In fact, I've hired a bunch of data scientists on my team over the last 3 years that I've built this team of super smart quants. And tell you what, they're like normal human beings. And we can have a conversation like this, but when they see a tough data problem, give them a data set, and then they go crazy over it. So once again, to our super smart data scientist, the question, and I'll start with her, and then maybe others can jump in. Is more data better? In the era of big data, as you know, our data sizes and volumes are going up, 35 zettabytes by year 2020, or maybe more. Do you agree that more data will lead to better decisions?
It can't hurt. More data cannot hurt. It is almost always better. I mean, in the healthcare arena, especially, the challenge is that things are so fragmented, even in research. So people just are drawn to one source of data. Like, this is what I study, genomics. So every answer I'm looking for is in here. It's the attitude, or medical images, computer vision. I'm going to be able to extract features from these images, and then I'll be able to predict this. But a lot of the time, any healthcare analytics, most of the healthcare analytics is run on claims data, which is, its purpose is not to capture the well-being of a patient, it's more for billing purposes. But you can actually, since it's widely available, you can get a lot of information about the prior diagnosis, procedures, and the test diagnosis, what type of test the person had. So I don't think any data source is capable of answering all those questions. So if you bring all these different data sources together, there is synergy, there is a possibility for us to learn more. So everything is solving a particular part of the puzzle. So more data is almost always better.
But don't you think wherever there is data, there is noise, there's cleanliness required, and unless you process the natural resource, you can't actually use that. So, data cleansing, data quality becomes more important in the world of big data, right?
Absolutely, and you can have a top-down approach and say, going forward, this is our standardization, and it has to be this clean. We need to make sure that it's going to put it in this particular fashion. That's fine, and if you have means to do it, of course, that's one way of guaranteeing that you have quality data. But you have multiple data sources, then you can actually clean the data during the analysis and say, this claims data is suggesting that this patient had a heart failure, but every medication that they have received during their hospitalization and the labs, etc., does not agree with that. So when you have more data, you have ability to interrogate the data and say, this is the part I believe in it, and this is the part I don't. And if you don't have all those additional data sources, you have to blindly believe in the data, and that can be very dangerous.
Essentially, start with the questions.
So we have a question from the audience.
All right. So while we get the questions, so start with more data. Have questions, and those questions will lead to patterns, and those patterns will lead to some insights and perhaps better decisions.
Inequality data can be achieved by using other data sources.
Right.
If these things do not agree with each other, then you'll question the quality of that data and maybe make a decision whether you'll keep it in the scope or not, or clean it somehow.
So it essentially leads to the topic of data governance, which we'll come to after this break with the audience question. Yes, sir. Please introduce yourself, your name, your company, and then the question.
I'm the Brave Soul, Al Alaverdi with Campstar, and I had a couple of questions actually. The first one I think you already addressed had to do with strategies around cleaning up the data. And how do you know that a piece of data is bad, especially when you have related data sets that are coming in. We do a lot with product quality, collecting product quality data across the supply chain. So, for example, if you pick up an iPhone or something like that, it's got a serial number on the back, and you want to know everything about every single component that's in there, as well as the customer experience. So it becomes very, very challenging for us to kind of aggregate and harmonize the data based on part numbers, serial numbers, because they weren't always being reported consistently. So thank you for addressing that. The second question, Brian, was for you. You mentioned the 360-degree view of customer. And I was just wondering, what are the top 3 insights you typically look for out of that data?
I would say in terms of retention piece is critical. And their customer experience, and that's kind of more nebulous because it follows the customer kind of experience from always from initial discovery through some kind of trial to kind of proof of concept to acquisition to production. Right? Those are the elements we look for, right? And the challenge of that is you have multiple, it's a complex environment. It's not a single person, it's multiple departments. That's the complexity that Dell has faced in our customer cases.
And do you often find that data comes to you fairly clean?
No. I think it's highly it's sporadic, but it's differentiated. It's not clean.
Thanks very much.
Just to add to that, 360-degree view of the data is not only from the marketing and sentiment perspective, it's basically adding whatever new sources of data that we're seeing from maybe social media and tying them back to the traditional transactional data that we already had, and completing a profile of our customer, knowing everything about that customer, and perhaps predicting the intent, whether the sentiment is positive or negative, and the intent to take decisions whether the customer is going to buy something from us or not, and overall then becoming a social MDM, social master data management system, whereby within your organizational systems you have as much intelligence about your customer as possible. And this is some of the use cases that we have implemented using a variety of technologies. What we call as social MDM is nothing but a combination of all this using big data technologies, but more importantly, it gives power to the CMO. And one study that we did also from Gartner, we found that going forward, line of business folks, you come from line of business, the CMOs are going to be spending much more than CIOs going forward. So, and this is a prediction which will come true as per Gartner from 2017 onwards. So think about it, and more power to CMOs and line of business folks in the audience.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for being a brave soldier here. All right, reverting back. Any more questions? Please line up. Otherwise, I'm gonna. All right, come on fast.
Hi.
My name is Sujoy Basu. I'm from G Software. I had a question about collaboration in this new world of big data. Not all the big data that you need is produced within the enterprise or acquired from vendors as master data. So, what are the models that you anticipate for collaboration when you have an enterprise working with, say, vendors or suppliers, and you have big data that often resides in different blocks?
This is a perfect question for Kathy, actually.
Yeah, you know what? It's kind of like you treat your data as a mashup, really. You know, and you know, I think the other part of that too is that you know, people have talked about services-oriented architecture for a long time, right? And you know, they've implemented it in kind of a way, you know, a monolithic way, right? But when you think about the new world and information as a service, it's you know, you treat it as you know, like smaller components, not one big giant enterprise service bus, right? So you know, but that services approach of consuming data from a multitude of sources, you know, doing things like having a registry of what your services are and being able to monitor those and have the right security associated with that, and you know, more of having a services gateway and that services-oriented approach. So you know, I view this as you have an excuse now to follow some of those best practices which people have complained about for a long time. Now there's a reason to actually put them into practice because you're going to need them now.
We extend that to information economy, and infonomics has been also talked about by a couple of analysts. Any thoughts on that? Anybody on the panel?
I actually wanted to add a little bit also. So this is a question that we think about, especially for large organizations, multinational organizations like GE. Sometimes it's hard to discover what data is out there available within the organization. So it's part of the data science practice. Since it is, we want to address that. We have a product called Chorus. So it allows data scientists to create workspaces and then provisioning, whatever the size of the sandbox that you need, you'll be able to create it and bring data from different places and actually look for data. It's like, it's hard to describe. It's like Google for data scientists. It's also has been called a social network for socially awkward people. So it's like, it allows people to collaborate with each other. You create these things, and whatever artifacts that you're generating during your project could be reused, could be discovered by others. Oh, this person implemented SVM, for instance. I think I'm going to need it also. You can just look for it and collaborate with other people. So you can discover data, you can discover people with specific skills. So those are some of the challenges data scientists do have.
Right, but it doesn't have to even be that fancy, right, of you know, what your catalog is, but you really do need to have a catalog of your data sources so that it is discoverable.
Yeah, and that's one way of doing it, and then it can also be, because of, it could evolve into a data dictionary, right? People can ask questions about this data source and somebody will answer, etc. Those things, if they're indexed also, they could be searched for, and instead of a top-down, it could be a bottom-up kind of approach. Well, there are multiple ways of accomplishing
You're
that.
raising the right questions, from the data discovery to standards to all the elements of big data governance that we want to come and talk about. So definitely that takes a very important function here.
But one of the things that I want to caution here is the media buzz about big data is so much that we forget that there's small data to be dealt with as well. Every organization that I go and talk about, enamored by the term big data, they want us to come and talk to them. And I'm sure as much as I do, you do get called as well to talk about big data with these clients.
they don't realize that they have not yet mastered the art of small data, and that starts with doing the basic housekeeping things, the data quality, data governance, the metadata strategies, the real art and science of information management foundation. Lay a strong foundation on which build the pillars, and then you build the house, and then it's a strong house for safe living, and really doing cool quantitative and visualization stuff that data scientists do. But unless you have mastered that basic level, it becomes very tough. So, any thoughts on that before we go to the question from the audience?
Well, I think that's the point that I was trying to make with information as a service. It's holistic, right? You really need to think about all of your data, and your big data is a component of that.
I have a comment, but maybe we can have our guest here to answer your question. It's
We
not, we want to hear from you.
don't
Talk
want
about
to
it,
hear.
please.
On a panel this morning, a gentleman from Cloudera was saying that there's three aspects for making a good data science. First is mathematical statistical ability. The second is ability to teach and explain to other people what you're doing. And the third one was programming, technological or engineering savvy. Would you add anything to that for being a good data scientist?
I think we were going to, a very good question actually, that was going to be my next question, and leads right into that. So why don't you take Julia?
I think that's a very complete list. Having the right insight, attitude towards data, and then intellectual curiosity, I think, is a requirement. When
That's
you're
a good
given,
one. Yeah.
when you're given data, you're curious enough to just work on it until you get something out of it. And then storytelling, of course, as you mentioned, is a huge part of what we do.
And visualization.
Visualization comes into the picture when you're telling a story, when you already made a discovery, for instance, and you need to convince others. Visualization at that point is a great tool to use. What I see, what my model is discovering is true. Look at this picture.
So go ahead with the follow-up question.
Yeah, so this is not actually related to the question, but another aspect of big data that seems to be a difficult one is where do you find sources outside of your company? Are there people out there that are looking to become data, to fill those data lakes?
Data service providers, are you
Yes.
talking about?
Where is that coming from, and how do you see that expanding over the coming years?
What kind of data are you talking about?
Well, all kinds of things.
One of the things that's happening from a cloud perspective is that a lot of companies are starting to think about their SaaS strategies. So I think that when you look for SaaS providers for your enterprise, for various capabilities, that you want to make sure that you are treating your data, and your data part of that is hugely important. And so, there are certain things that we look for in terms of like having RESTful services that you can consume, and making sure that you have ownership over your data, and making sure that that you can have access to it in like a self-service type of a manner. But I'm just saying that I think your SaaS applications are going to be a rich source of data for you to consume.
And right now, that responsibility is data scientists. It's responsibility, right? Let's say I'm studying hospital readmissions. I'm wondering if I can predict at the time of discharge whether this person is going to come back within 30 days with similar complaints. So let's say I'm only using the provider's data. I know exactly what happened in the hospital, and I can build in a lot of interesting features to capture the quality of the care the person received during their hospitalization. But it is not 7 days, it is 30 days. So it really matters what happened, that I understand what happens outside of the hospital. So usually those kinds of data discoveries happen by project. It's not, you don't have a catalog of different data sources to look at, but then you start thinking, well, I'm looking at my data and I see that 40% of them are actually discharged to skilled nursing facility. Will it be possible for my customer to get that data at the patient level so that I'll have an understanding of their well-being outside of the hospital? Well, that's not a possibility. What else can I do? At the facility level, would I know if they went to a good nursing facility or not? oh, take a look at this. Google is your best friend at this point, of course. Oh, CMS has actually facility level data. They have annual reviews, and you can understand all kinds of shortcomings that certain facility has. So then you incorporate facility level data. Sometimes you want to know the socioeconomic status of a patient, for instance, because you know that it is going to play a role in whatever you're studying, and there may be, or it may already be documented well in the literature review, but for the particular problem you're studying, it's not captured explicitly. Then you start thinking, I know the zip codes that they come from. I wonder if I can find something at the zip code level, for instance. And IRS has a great data source that will tell me the adjusted gross income by zip code, and we are very much like our neighbors, right? So it could be a good proxy for socioeconomic status. It's just whatever you're studying, there's no catalog that says for the problem you're studying, these are the ones that are most relevant. But I mean, it's from studying the problem, from studying the literature, understanding that what type of data might be relevant, and then go out to the world and look for it.
You have to have that curiosity and
Exactly.
outside. Thank you.
So curiosity one, thank you for bringing that question. And actually just to add on to that, Google Flu Trends, right? So that data is freely available. You've got to be able to correlate that data and see if something emerges from that pattern. And then there are data service providers. Nielsen used to be able to provide some entertainment data. There are other data providers which are coming and aggregators. Nexium happens to be one which has the largest set of consumer data on the planet and derived from all credit card transactions. Like that, there are commercial data sets, and then there are open data sets available in the market on data.gov.
And I guess the other thing too is you can think about maybe crowdsourcing some of the data too. I think a lot of it depends on what kind of data it is that you're finding, right?
Yeah, so there's the open data, and then the data the governments are making things transparent and making their data available as well. So there are tremendous data sources available outside that you should explore. And again, just curious, in your day-to-day work, all of you can take a shot at it. Do you buy those external data sets, or you look at the freely available ones, right?
We certainly buy, absolutely. So there's a lot, on the CRM side, customer acquisition, plethora of service providers, data service providers trying to grab anything your data set. So absolutely.
Oh yeah, I can tell you we definitely do buy some external data sources as part of that, absolutely.
You want to name any ones which you top of mind?
Even for things like location data, yeah.
I mean, we don't buy directly. Our customers do buy sometimes those data sources that they think might be relevant for what we're studying. And there's always data out there. So Kaiser Permanente, for instance, had a hackathon, and they invited 4 Hadoop vendors, including IBM. And then they gave us data, and it was their medication order history. And then they brought in external data sources like air quality data and said, would you be able to tell an interesting story? You have 24 hours. And so that's Google Flu Trends was something that we used, for instance, in order to seasonalize some of the data that we were seeing for respiratory illness medication order history. So there's always data out there that you, not necessarily at the person level, but at some level that is relevant to the problem that you're studying.
Essentially, it's up to the quants and then the smart data scientists to be curious enough and be able to relate. And sometimes I feel that what we used to call as outliers in the data set are actually very valuable pieces of data today. Some things that we used to throw away, some things that we thought that is not possible to analyze. Now the technology exists at a much cheaper and much easier way to analyze, and thanks to the platforms enabled through the big data technologies. Now, that's very important. In fact, while you were looking at your hand, I saw it's some kind of a device which has it's related to Internet of Everything, Internet of Things. So you want to say how sensor data is going to change in the data game plan?
Yeah, I don't remember who said it, but someone said the most interesting healthcare data is the one that we're not capturing. What happens between visits? So there is an opportunity now that we can understand how people are acting, how adherent they are to a certain regimen that was prescribed to them, the medication that they're supposed to take, the diet that was given to them because of the condition that they have. I think just making that data available is going to improve the quality of the models, because right now we don't know. We rely on patients telling us that they've been active and they took their medication. We don't have good data on that. And self-reporting is known to be very biased because of a lot of reasons. So desirability, you don't want your physician to be upset with you, you don't want to fail them, and you don't even, maybe between visits you have 3 months and you don't even remember some of those events to actually report on. We're just putting too much of the burden on the patient. Instead, we can have these devices that will collect the necessary data and we'll be able to discover some new correlations that will help us prescribe something a little more suitable for this particular patient.
So one is variables, and those generate data and data points. But then there are things like medicine also having some kind of a signal built in. The moment you ingest that medicine, a signal gets recorded. So that's another kind of thing. And then there are pill boxes which have, I remember a startup called Pill Jogger that reminds you to take your medicine at a specified time. If you haven't taken, an alert goes on. So things like that are generating. So Kathy wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, well I was just saying, Internet of Things I think is really very, very interesting. And I had an interesting case come up within an enterprise model as well. So our corporate services department was interested in understanding the traffic flow of people through the building, just because they wanted to understand what the next generation office space should look like, right? And so they wanted to understand what the utilization was around the office space that was available. And so, they called me in from a cloud perspective to have some conversation over that. And so I think just all kinds of really creative uses, even within the enterprise for data.
I think we have a question here. We last 2 questions.
Hi, I'm Monique from Talking Big Data. I have a question. So the healthcare issue is very interesting because there's very mixed data that you can gather. But when I think about big data, quite often I think about other forms of data from social media, including videos. How is that incorporated into the model that you're providing, or is it incorporated? And then the other question is, when you're taking data from sources like social media, how do you age that data out or determine that it's not valid data?
You want to go first? I have a perspective, but I'll let Brian or Leah take first.
Sure. So with healthcare, data is big because you have medical images, for instance. You want to be able to extract features from them. You have sequence data, genomics data, which is really big. And then you have your health history and then health behavior. All of those data points, it can add up and it can be somewhat large. But when people talk about network, for instance, I'm always amused that just social media comes to mind. In a lot of data sources, there are networks. You do understand who this person is friends with, who they work with, or which physician actually is referring to, what other physicians, which labs tend to work with other with physicians. So all that data is sometimes inherent. Sometimes you don't really need to go to Facebook or Twitter to understand the relationships between people. Maybe it is already in your data. So I don't think big data is limited to social media. And you're absolutely right that data tends to age rather quickly, and especially it's true for healthcare data. So if I'm going to build a comparative effectiveness model, I wouldn't rely on things that were collected 5 years ago, because the practice changes so quickly. Some of the things that I will discover are not going to be relevant at all. So cancer treatment, for instance, 5 years ago and now, it's just a completely different animal. So data tend to age.
Okay, so I just want to mention, so one of the things that the ODCA is going to work on this year is also, assuming that we have enough resources to actually do the work this year, but around metadata and tagging as well. So, and a lot of that technology probably doesn't exist yet, but, I think that's what it's going to come down to in the future, and we'll see more.
Right. Just two quick ideas about aging piece. Look at it from a campaign perspective or product perspective. It may help bookend in terms of the age and time value we're looking at.
So time value of data is something that actually I have written about in a paper published by IEEE data governance. So what I feel is the social media data ages very quickly. You cannot rely on the even a month-old data for consumer sentiments and buying behavior. So definitely there are different types of data, hot data, cold data, and you've got to make sure for the application, the use case that you are going to use, you consider time value of data and apply it properly. So with that, we'll take one more question and then a final round because we are over time actually.
Yeah, thanks. So it sounds like there's a lot of talking about what to do with the data and how to get the data into the cloud and what insights can we draw from the data. But I'm more curious about, and it's come up a little bit, about the getting of the data to allow a holistic picture of, for example, in healthcare, a patient's current state of health, well-being, all of the dimensions of health, and how a clinician, together with many, many other multidisciplinary partners, can make decisions and ask the right questions using this holistic kind of collection of data. So do you guys have a lot of hope, or have you seen a lot of evidence of collecting this kind of information, ranging from behavioral risk factors to social determinants? Yes, it's sort of along the population health area that I'm thinking, but it seems like there's so much potential to get data from patients, and so much interest in patients sharing that data, especially since they will have a role in how that data is used.
Brian, you want to go?
Nothing maybe.
Sure. So yeah, you're absolutely right that there is a trend for making patient more powerful, so giving the information to the patient so that they'll be in charge of whatever condition that they have and they'll manage it. And bringing all those different data sources into a single place so that it can be analyzed is another challenge. And some providers, if they're vertically integrated, for instance, are in a better position to actually take advantage of that because they see everything. No one healthcare player has all the data about an individual, and that is a problem. But I think that's a problem that is acknowledged and recognized, and health information exchange is accepted. It is an effort to bring all that data available to the person at the point of care, and it needs to be solved.
Well, I don't know how time went by. I thought it would be difficult to cover 1 hour. It's been more than an hour, 5 minutes over, and I still haven't covered 1/4 of the question I had. So maybe we'll reserve that for some other time. But as a closing parting shot, in a tweet-worthy statement, 140 characters or less, starting from Brian, what are your thoughts on developing a big data game plan?
Don't overlook your dark data.
Okay, who likes free stuff? Yes. Okay, OpenDataCenterAlliance.org. You can download the usage models and requirements, and you can do it right now.
It's hard to summarize everything that we talked about in 140 characters. So don't wait, start now. Hashtag
Data 360 SF and big data, and we are just getting started with big data. We are at the cusp of a revolution like no other. So stay tuned and think big. With that, please join me in thanking the panelists, and thank you very much, audience, for staying till now.